At 75, King Charles just dropped a real bombshell that's left everyone gobsmacked and put all doubts to rest. He's confirmed what we've been quietly suspecting for ages, for decades. All sorts of rumors and whispers have trailed this future king, from his personal life to how he'd shape the monarchy. And now, with this jaw-dropping revelation, it looks like King Charles is finally ready to face the truth head-on. So, what does this mean for the royal family, his legacy, or even the future of the British throne? Come on, let's dive into the juicy details of what King Charles just spilled. Hey, did you know that King Charles' life hasn't exactly been a walk in the park since day one? Born on November 14th, 1948, as the eldest son of Queen Elizabeth II and Prince Philip, Charles was pretty much set on a path like no other. He came into the world destined to be king someday. That pressure weighed on him from when he was just a little kid, even though back then he was just a BA growing up under the massive shadow of a powerhouse monarch. The way he was raised, totally different from any other kid in Britain, steeped in royal traditions, constantly under the public's watchful eye, and with this heavy sense of duty to the crown always hanging around. Now at 75, King Charles has finally opened up about what we've all been secretly wondering. And trust me, what he said might just catch you off guard. But hold up, before we get into that, let me share a couple of cool tidbits about him. First off, Charles was never your typical future king that people pictured. As a kid, he was pretty quiet and liked his own company, with this sensitive, thoughtful vibe that was a far cry from the bold, confident leaders folks were used to. While his mom, Queen Elizabeth II, handled royal duties like it was second nature, Charles seemed to struggle with the huge expectations piled on him. From his days at Gordonstone, where they say he wasn't exactly thrilled, to those awkward public appearances as a young guy. It was clear early on that the weight of royal life had him sweating buckets. As he grew into his teens and early adulthood, Charles found it tough to fit the mold people expected of a future monarch. He was into stuff that wasn't exactly standard for a prince. Think intellectual pursuits, art, and environmental issues, things he'd later champion while waiting his turn for the throne. But back then, those interests didn't quite line up with what the public thought a future king should be into. Everyone wanted a strong, charismatic leader who could stand tall against the pressures of a modern monarchy. Instead, they got a guy who seemed unsure, reserved, and sometimes a bit out of touch with the everyday struggles of his future subjects. Charles' quiet nature often got mistaken for aloofness, and he'd get flack for being too serious or missing the charm his mom had in spades. Every time he stepped out in public, the media and folks would scrutinize him top to bottom, which only fueled growing doubts about whether he'd cut it as king when the time came. Even inside royal circles, there were whispers that maybe he wasn't the right fit to lead the monarchy into the future. His clumsiness at public ceremonies and knack for dodging the spotlight just added to the worry. The pressure ramped up even more thanks to the towering figure of his mom, Queen Elizabeth, loved by all and famous for her steady, hands-on approach to royal duties. Next to her, Charles looked less decisive and nowhere near as ready for the crown, sparking questions about whether he was up for the job. Honestly, people couldn't help but compare him to her and wonder, does this guy have what it takes to steer the monarchy through this fast-changing world? As Charles grew older, some of his personal choices only deepened those doubts. Take 1981, for instance. The whole world was buzzing as Prince Charles tied the knot with Lady Diana Spencer in a massive royal wedding. The ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral was pure spectacle, and the young couple instantly became global stars. Diana, just 20 at the time, won everyone over with her beauty, elegance, and what seemed like the perfect modern princess vibe. On the surface, it looked like a match made in heaven. But behind that royal glitz, cracks in their relationship started showing up pretty quick. Right from the start, there were hints that things weren't smooth sailing for Charles and Diana. A 12-year age gap, plus totally opposite personalities, stirred up some tension. Charles, in his early 30s and used to royal pressures, was all about his duties and personal interests. Meanwhile, Diana got thrown into the global spotlight and struggled to cope with the relentless scrutiny that came with being a royal. Even with those underlying issues, the public was totally smitten with them, and Diana soon earned the title People's Princess. But as time went on, it became obvious Charles and Diana were on completely different paths. Diana's charm and compassion had people adoring her in a way that totally overshadowed Charles. She had this natural knack for connecting with folks, especially through her charity work and public appearances. Charles, on the other hand, often came off as distant and reserved. The media played a huge role in blowing up this perception, painting Diana as the warm, relatable princess and Charles as the cold, emotionless future king. The public's eyes were glued to their marriage more and more, and every move Charles made was under a microscope. The press kept comparing them, and as Diana's star rose, Charles's flaws stood out even more in people's minds. The brighter she shone, the more he seemed to fade into the background. Before long, rumors of trouble in their marriage started swirling, and all eyes turned to the cracks in their royal partnership. One of the biggest reasons their marriage fell apart was Charles' ongoing relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles. Even before marrying Diana, Charles had a close bond with Camilla, and that didn't stop during his marriage. When details of this came out, the media went wild, pushing the Charles and Diana drama to fever pitch. His infidelity trashed his image and sparked a wave of sympathy for Diana. Seen as the wronged wife, Diana's famous 1995 BBC Panorama interview only widened the gap. She opened up about her struggles in the royal family, her mental health, and the strain in her marriage to Charles. Most memorably, she dropped the iconic line, "There were three of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded," hinting at Charles' long-running thing with Camilla. Public sympathy for Diana skyrocketed, while Charles' reputation took a massive hit. He was pegged as the guy who not only messed up his marriage, but betrayed the beloved princess. Diana's legacy kept growing after their 1992 separation and 1996 divorce. She became a global icon, using her platform to champion causes like landmine awareness and HIV/AIDS research. Her compassion and ability to connect personally made her one of the world's most admired figures. Charles, meanwhile, kept wrestling with his public image. Even post-divorce, Diana's shadow loomed large, making it tough for him to shake the view that he was a cold, distant guy who didn't value the wife he once had. When Diana tragically died in a 1997 car crash, the world mourned, and the royal family faced harsh criticism over how they handled it. Charles, in particular, was seen as detached, reinforcing the public's belief that he wasn't cut out for the emotional demands of leadership. Though he tried his best to navigate the fallout from her death, the overwhelming love for Diana and the media's focus on her legacy kept defining him for years. He was labeled the man who wronged the people's princess, a tag that stuck with him well into later life. But lately, in the past few months, there are signs Charles has started digging deeper into his past, including his relationship with Diana. At 70, it seems he's rethinking the role she played, not just in his life, but in shaping how people see him and the monarchy as a whole. Diana's legacy still packs a punch today, and Charles, now king, appears to have a fresh take on how vital it is to connect with people personally and compassionately, like she did. There's a hint that Charles might be looking back at some of his past moves and decisions, especially around his marriage and Camilla. While the damage from those years can't be undone, his recent approach to royal duties suggests he's learned a thing or two. In a way, Diana's lasting impact might have nudged Charles toward a more empathetic, hands-on style as king, maybe in a final bid to win over a public that's long seen him as distant and out of touch. His marriage to Diana, its chaos, and the aftermath have undeniably shaped how people view Charles. Yet now, in his later years, he's showing signs of owning up to those past struggles, stepping into his role with a seriousness and reflection that could well tie back to lessons from Lady Di's memory. But that's not the only thing tied to what he's finally admitted at 75, so stick with me here. Charles holds the unique title of Britain's longest-serving heir apparent. For over 70 years, he waited in line for the throne, living under the shadow of Queen Elizabeth's reign, while the public focused on the Queen's steady service and strong leadership. Charles's spot as the future monarch often felt more like an endless holding pattern than a clear role. His whole adult life was spent prepping for a job that always seemed just out of reach, leaving him with a frustration that trailed him for decades. Charles' wait was unprecedented. No other British monarch has been an heir for as long as he was. That long delay definitely fed into the idea that he was a guy stuck in limbo, always on the brink of kingly duties but never quite getting there. It's easy to imagine how frustrating it must have been as the years ticked by, unable to fully step into the role promised to him since birth. And that frustration? It wasn't exactly a secret. As he got older, people kept asking whether he'd ever become king and, more crucially, whether he could handle the gig. With his mom reigning into her 90s, some wondered if Charles would even get the crown or if it'd skip straight to his son, Prince William. Those doubts, paired with the public's fondness for the younger, more charismatic royals, only deepened the uncertainty around his future as king. But Charles didn't just sit around twiddling his thumbs during those waiting years. While the throne stayed out of reach, he found other ways to make his mark. Without full-on royal duties, he poured his energy into causes close to his heart. Think environmentalism, architecture, and charity work. These efforts became a big part of who he was publicly, giving us a peek at the man behind the Prince of Wales title. Charles has been a green advocate for ages, way before climate change hit the mainstream. He was raising the alarm about deforestation, pollution, and unsustainable farming. His environmental passion often got skeptical side eyes, especially early on when those issues weren't global priorities, but he stuck to his guns, using his platform to push sustainable practices and conservation long before they were trendy. Over time, his forward thinking earned him props for being ahead of the curve, though it also drew flack from folks who thought a future king should stick to more traditional royal stuff. Beyond the environment, Charles was into architecture and urban planning too. He wasn't shy about slamming modern designs he thought clashed with the UK's historical and cultural vibe. His takes on architecture stirred debate, especially when he publicly bashed some big-name building designs. Despite the pushback, he stayed true to his vision of keeping Britain's towns and cities aesthetically on point, even setting up the Prince's Foundation to promote traditional building and sustainable urban growth. On top of that, Charles threw himself into charity work through the Prince's Trust, which he kicked off in 1976. He helped struggling young people get skills and jobs. And over the years, the Trust has supported hundreds of thousands, earning him a rep as a philanthropist who's serious about making a difference. Still, public opinion on Charles stayed split. His environmentalism and charity gigs won respect in some circles, but plenty of folks saw him as a bit out of step with the modern world. Some pegged his outspoken takes on things like architecture and organic farming as quirky, if not a tad elitist. For years, the question lingered, is Charles really king material? That readiness question dogged him all through his time as heir. People used to Queen Elizabeth's steady, traditional leadership weren't always sure Charles was cut from the same cloth. His personal struggles, like the rocky years with Diana, only fueled more doubts about whether he could handle the crown. Even his forward-looking environmentalism, now widely embraced, was once seen as odd, raising fears he might not be the stable, consistent monarch the country needed. But in recent months, it seems King Charles is starting to own up to those long-standing suspicions. As he steps into his kingly role, there's a vibe that he's reflecting on those endless waiting years and the public doubts that came with them. Charles' role as dad to Prince William and Prince Harry has had its highs and lows. After Diana's tragic death, he was left grappling with his own grief while raising two boys in the public eye. Her loss left a gaping hole in their family, and Charles had to guide William and Harry through their key years under constant scrutiny. In many ways, his bond with his sons has been tricky, especially with the media always watching. With William, the more duty-bound and ready for royal life son, things were sometimes tense but mostly steady. Charles could offer him a path like his own, rooted in monarchy traditions and expectations. But with Harry, it's been a lot stormier, especially lately after Harry stepped back from royal duties and moved to the US. The family dynamic got visibly fractured. Harry's candid digs at the royals, including his dad's parenting and how the institution treated Meghan Markle, caused a rift that's still not fully mended. Charles found himself under public pressure again, this time about keeping the family together. Despite the drama, these personal struggles might have sparked a shift in his outlook. Lately, there's been chatter that Charles is starting to grasp the weight of his responsibilities, not just as king, but as a dad and public figure. Those tough times with his sons, though not openly admitted, have surely shaped who he is today. A guy who, at 75, seems to be rethinking both his personal and royal duties. But there's one more thing, or rather, person, we should zoom in on. Camilla and his role as king. The relationship between King Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles has long been one of the most talked about parts of his personal life. What started as a scandal during his marriage to Diana eventually led to their 2005 wedding, a move many saw as bold for a future king. For years, Camilla got a rough ride in the media, often dubbed the other woman who helped break Charles and Diana's marriage. Public opinion was fiercely against her, and folks wondered if the British public would ever accept her as a royal. Over time, though, her story shifted. As the years rolled on, she took on a more active, visible role in royal duties, teaming up with Charles on charity efforts and public outings. The couple's dedication to their causes and steady presence in public life slowly softened people's views of the woman who'd one day be their queen. She might never have hit Diana-level popularity, but Camilla's image went from scandalous to accepted. When Charles took the throne in 2022, Camilla became queen consort, a title that still sparks some debate but shows her place beside Charles as he leads the monarchy. Charles' first months as king weren't without hiccups. Switching from Queen Elizabeth's long, stable reign to his came with its own challenges. People questioned whether Charles, now in his 70s, was really up for being a modern monarch. Lingering doubts about his past choices and personal life, plus worries about matching his mom's decades of respect and unity, hung around. During this time, Charles faced big pressure to prove himself. He had to tackle the challenges of his new role while dealing with the intense public scrutiny that's followed him most of his life. Early in his reign, he took on those doubts headfirst, zeroing in on issues that mattered to him and the country. He kept pushing environmental causes like he had for decades and worked to keep the monarchy relevant while honoring tradition. As king, Charles has slowly started quieting down some of those doubters about his leadership chops. His steady approach, plus Camilla's growing acceptance, has helped him stand firmer as monarch. The shaky start to his reign seems to have given way to a more confident style, one that reflects a man who's spent a lifetime gearing up for this. Though it kicked off with uncertainty, Charles has made some key changes that signal a fresh era for the monarchy. As his leadership keeps evolving, there are signs he's ready to take on the responsibility. So, at 75, King Charles finally came clean about what we've all been suspecting. He spent decades fighting for environmental cause and speaking boldly on stuff close to his heart. But now he admits his leadership style has shifted, more measured, cautious, and focused on keeping the monarchy stable rather than chasing big, bold reforms. This new approach is clear proof that Charles might have finally embraced his role's weight in a way people long wondered if he could. One of the biggest signs? He's stepping up his game in domestic and international affairs. Since taking the throne, Charles has shown a renewed commitment to his duties, getting more hands-on than many expected. He's popping up more at state events, diplomatic meetings, and charity gigs, signaling he's ready to lead with a steady hand. His schedule's packed with official engagements now, and he seems more determined than ever to rep the monarchy on the world stage. This uptick in action shows a king who, despite his age, is eager to prove he can steer the royal ship right. Charles is also tweaking how he handles past criticism. For years, he was seen as distant, especially after his marriage to Diana. The public turned hard against him when his affair with Camilla went public. And Diana's sudden death only cemented the idea that he'd failed to meet expectations. As a husband, a future king, and most importantly, a dad to little William and Harry. My wife was loved by millions. Charles once reflected about Diana. He also owned up to what we'd all suspected. She was a devoted mom. Her legacy, even decades after her passing, still casts a long shadow over the monarchy. And it's clear Charles has had to come to grips with the public's deep affection for her. Now as king, it seems he's finally ready to face that legacy, acknowledging both the admiration Diana earned and the flack from their rocky relationship. The gap between him and his sons, especially after Diana's death, has been another lingering issue. Things with Prince Harry are still tense, with Harry openly slamming both his dad and the royal setup in recent years. But Charles seems to be taking a more restrained tack, steering clear of jumping into the noisy family drama publicly, maybe part of a bigger push to keep the royal vibe neutral. That's a big shift from his younger days when he was more vocal on divisive topics. Moving to a traditional, calmer royal stance has won him some respect, as he now seems more about preserving the institution than pushing his own views. So, what do you reckon about King Charles? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think.